Look, I'm going to level with you right from the start. The Galactic Military Academy is not a place for the weak, the timid, or anyone with a functioning sense of self-preservation. It's where the galaxy's finest come to prove they've got what it takes to protect civilized space from whatever cosmic nightmare is waiting out there in the dark. And if you think your basic training was tough, well, you haven't met the panic chamber. The panic chamber is the Academy's final exam, the big kahuna. The test that separates the actual soldiers from the overconfident idiots who just looked good in the recruitment posters. It's a psychological endurance trial that has broken decorated war heroes, reduced veteran pilots to sobbing messes, and sent more cadets into early retirement than any actual combat situation. The chamber has a 92% failure rate. 92%. Those are not comforting numbers. On this particular morning, 5 cadets stood outside the chamber doors, and I use the term stood loosely because one of them was more of a hovering situation and another was basically a sentient pile of jelly. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Commander Varkesh, all 7 feet of scales in military disappointment, paced in front of the cadets with his forearms clasped behind his back. He had the kind of face that looked like it had never smiled, not even once, not even as a hatchling. His species, the Draknari, were known for 2 things: being really hard to kill and having absolutely zero sense of humor. "Cadets," Varkesh began, his voice like gravel in a blender. "Beyond these doors lies the panic chamber. You all know what awaits you. 3 hours of concentrated psychological stress designed to break your mind and expose your weaknesses. Most of you will fail. Statistically speaking, 4.6 of you will fail." "Sir, there's only 5 of us," squeaked Cadet Pella, the gelatinous Quarian who was already stress-sweating mild acid and leaving small burn marks on the floor. "How does 0.6 of a person fail?" "Spectacularly," Varkesh replied without missing a beat. Next to Pella stood, or rather loomed, Cadet Thornix. He was a Klaxian, which meant he looked like someone had given a praying mantis a gym membership and anger management issues. His exoskeleton gleamed with what I can only describe as aggressive confidence. Thornix had never failed a test in his life, and he made sure everyone knew it constantly at every possible opportunity, including during meals. "I appreciate the warning, Commander," Thornix clicked, his mandibles clacking with superiority. "But I have prepared for this moment my entire life. My mental fortitude is unbreakable. My focus is absolute. I have meditated for 6 months straight." "You were unconscious," Varkesh said flatly. "You were in a coma. Medical specifically noted it was not meditation." "A medically induced meditative state?" Thornix corrected, which was somehow worse. Then there was Cadet Rin, a Vexorian who looked like someone crossed an otter with a shadow, and Cadet Hollis, a Centauran with too many eyes and not enough common sense. But the real star of our show, the one who's going to make this story worth your time, was standing at the end of the line, swaying slightly like a building in a mild earthquake. Cadet Marcus Webb, human, 23 Earth years old, 5 foot 10 inches of sleep deprivation and poor life choices. Marcus had the kind of face that suggested he'd been tired since birth. Dark circles under his eyes that could qualify as carry-on luggage. His uniform was technically regulation, but wore it with the energy of someone who'd gotten dressed in the dark while falling downstairs. He was currently, and I want you to appreciate this detail, holding a cup of coffee that had to be his 6th of the morning. It was only 0800 hours. "Cadet Webb," Varkesh said, his reptilian eyes narrowing. "Are you prepared?" Marcus looked up like he'd just been woken from a standing nap, which, knowing Marcus, he probably had. "Oh yeah, totally. Super prepared. Ready to panic or whatever we're doing." Varkesh's scales did this thing where they rippled with barely contained frustration. He'd been trying to wash Marcus out of the program for 3 semesters, but the human kept accidentally succeeding through what could only be described as spite and caffeine. "The chamber will begin in 5 minutes. I suggest you all make peace with whatever gods you believe in." Varkesh gestured toward the massive doors with one of his arms while checking his datapad with another. Multitasking, the Draknari specialty. "Sir," Pella gurgled nervously, "is it true that Cadet Morphax had to be sedated for 6 weeks after his attempt?" Morphax went in confident. Morphax came out speaking in rhyming couplets and proposing marriage to furniture. Do not be like Morphax. Varkesh pulled open the chamber doors with 2 arms while the other 2 typed notes, probably something like, "Prepare extra medical staff for the human's inevitable spectacular breakdown." The chamber beyond was white, aggressively white, the kind of white that made your eyes hurt and your brain confused. In the center sat 5 chairs that looked surprisingly comfortable, which was probably a trap because nothing in the military is ever actually comfortable. "Enter," Varkesh commanded. They entered. Thornix strutted. Pella oozed with trepidation. Rin slithered nervously. Hollis walked carefully with all those eyes looking everywhere at once, probably trying to spot the danger early, and Marcus shuffled in, still holding his coffee, and immediately scoped out the corners like he was looking for the best seat at a boring lecture. The doors sealed behind them with a hiss that promised bad times ahead. "Beginning neural interface in 30 seconds, announced a cheerful AI voice that had definitely been programmed by someone with a cruel sense of humor. "Please remain calm. Panic is inevitable. Resistance is futile. Have a great day." The thing about advanced alien technology is that it's really good at what it does, which is unfortunate when what it does is psychologically torture you with surgical precision. The panic chamber didn't mess around with cheap jump scares or creepy music. No, it went straight into your brain, found your deepest fears, your worst memories, your most traumatic experiences, and then turned them into a 3-hour immersive nightmare that felt absolutely real. The neural interface booted up with a sound like reality hiccuping. The white room began to shimmer, and each cadet's personal hell started loading like the universe's worst streaming service. Thornix went first because of course he did. His section of the room dissolved into a massive Klaxian hive, thousands of his species all turning to look at him with their compound eyes. Then, in unison, they began to laugh. Not human laughter, but the clicking, chittering mockery of his own kind. The queen herself materialized, towering and magnificent, and pointed one massive claw directly at Thornix. "Your exoskeleton," she announced to the assembled hive, "is the wrong shade of green. You are hereby banished for being aesthetically displeasing." Thornix's mandibles dropped open in pure horror. No, that's not possible. I'm within the acceptable color spectrum. I checked. I have charts." The hive continued laughing, and Thornix dropped to his knees, all his earlier confidence evaporating like spit on a hot plate. He began frantically polishing his exoskeleton with his forearms, muttering about pigmentation and social acceptance. Pella's nightmare was somehow worse because it was simpler. The gelatinous Quarian found himself facing a massive holographic screen displaying a single equation, an impossible, unsolvable mathematical problem that seemed to grow more complex every time Pella looked at it. For a species whose entire culture revolved around mathematical harmony and numerical balance, this was like staring into the abyss and having the abyss stare back while asking you to show your work. No, Pella burbled, already starting to literally melt from stress. "If we integrate the quantum variable and account for the dimensional coefficient, then we need to, but wait. That would require, oh no, this doesn't balance, nothing balances." Small wisps of steam started rising from Pella's gelatinous form as the acid stress sweat kicked into high gear. Rin's section turned into a crowd, just a massive, oppressive crowd of beings from every species, all pressing close, touching, grabbing, with no personal space and no escape. For a Vexorian, who needed solitude like humans needed oxygen, this was a special kind of torture. Rin started hyperventilating, pressing against the wall, trying to phase through it, but the neural interface kept him solid. Hollis got a nightmare about all his eyes failing one by one until he was completely blind, which for a species that navigated primarily by sight was like removing someone's entire sensory system. He was already crying from at least 6 of his eyes. And then there was Marcus. The human had walked calmly to the far corner of the chamber, the spot with the best back support against 2 walls, and had sat down with practiced ease. He'd pulled something from his pocket that looked like a protein bar, or possibly compressed sadness in food form, and taken a bite while watching the other's nightmares boot up around him. Then Marcus had closed his eyes, not squeezed them shut in terror, not clenched them against some horrible vision, just closed them, like someone settling in for a nice afternoon nap on a park bench. Outside the chamber in the observation room, Commander Varkesh stared at the monitors with all four of his arms frozen in various positions of confusion. "What," he said slowly, "is the human doing?" Instructor Quelix, a floating brain in a jar who served as the Academy's head of psychological warfare, bobbed closer to the screen. According to his neural readings, he appears to be entering a sleep state. That's impossible. The chamber has been active for 2 minutes. It should be bombarding him with terror scenarios. Why is he not screaming? "The system is working perfectly, Commander," Quelix reported, several of his monitoring tendrils tapping at the controls. "The chamber is cycling through the human fear database. It started with public speaking, moved to arachnids, then to social embarrassment, then to something called student loans, which apparently is some form of Earth financial torture, then to expired dairy products, then to, oh, this is interesting, the fear of a phone ringing when he's already on the phone." On the monitor, Marcus shifted slightly, getting more comfortable against the wall. A tiny sound emerged from the corner. Was he snoring? "Increase the intensity," Varkesh ordered, his scales rippling with determination. "I want full-spectrum fear projection." "Sir, we're only 10 minutes in. Standard protocol is to gradually increase over the first hour." "Do I look like I care about standard protocol right now, Quelix? The human is sleeping in the panic chamber. Make him stop." The neural interface ramped up. In Thornix's section, the Hive Queen declared him aggressively mediocre in every measurable way. Thornix began screaming and reciting his academic achievements to no one who was listening. Pella had melted into a puddle roughly 3 inches deep and was making sounds that the translators couldn't process because they were just pure mathematical anguish. Marcus's nightmare scenario shifted to zombie apocalypse, then nuclear war, then a family dinner where his mother asked when he was going to settle down and give her grandchildren, then a customer service phone call that lasted 45 minutes just to change an address. The human mumbled something that sounded like 5 more minutes and shifted to his other side. "This is not possible," Varkesh hissed. "What is wrong with him? Is his neural interface malfunctioning?" Instructor Thelma, a crystalline being who taught xenobiology, chimed in with her melodic voice. "His brain activity is normal for a sleeping human, actually below normal. He's in quite a deep sleep cycle. I'm reading delta waves." "Delta waves? In the panic chamber?" Varkesh's voice climbed an octave, which for a Dreknari was alarming. "Very peaceful delta waves," Thelma confirmed. "I think he's dreaming about fishing, or possibly noodles. Human dream interpretation is not my specialty." More instructors began filtering into the observation room. Word was spreading through the Academy that something unprecedented was happening. Humans had been part of the galactic military for only 2 years, and they were still figuring out what made the species tick. Apparently, immune to psychological torture chambers was going on the list. "Hypothesis," Quelix announced, his brain pulsing thoughtfully in its jar. "The human has achieved some form of advanced meditative state. Earth monks are known for exceptional mental control." Everyone looked at the monitor where Marcus had somehow impossibly started drooling a little. "That's not meditation," Varkesh said flatly. "That's a nap. In my chamber, during final evaluations." His tail lashed in agitation, knocking over a chair. "This is the worst day of my career." Inside the chamber, things were deteriorating rapidly for everyone except Marcus. Thornix had moved past denial and into bargaining, trying to convince his nightmare hive that he could change. He could molt into a better color. Please just give him another chance. Rin had pressed himself so flat against the wall he was basically two-dimensional. Hollis was rocking back and forth, bumping into things because half his eyes had failed in the simulation. And Pella was just a puddle with a voice. The equation, the puddle burbled weakly, has no solution. Reality is a lie. Mathematics has forsaken us all. In the corner, Marcus's protein bar had fallen from his relaxed hand. He was fully asleep now, head tilted back against the wall, breathing deeply and evenly, looking more peaceful than anyone had a right to look while surrounded by the psychological breakdown of 4 highly trained military cadets. Commander Varkesh made a decision that he would later describe in his incident report as tactically questionable but emotionally necessary. "Override safety protocols," he commanded. "Manual control. I'm going to wake up that human if it's the last thing I do. Sir, that's extremely dangerous. The chamber isn't designed for... Do it. The observation room went quiet. This was either going to be legendary or a court-martial. Possibly both. When Commander Varkesh said he was going to wake Marcus up, what he actually meant was he was going to throw the entire weight of the panic chamber's neural network at the sleeping human like a psychological sledgehammer. This was not in the manual. This was, in fact, specifically forbidden by the manual, which had an entire chapter titled, Why You Should Never Do What Commander Varkesh Is About to Do. The chamber's systems screamed in protest as Varkesh manually overrode every safety feature that generations of engineers had carefully implemented. Warning lights flashed, alarms beeped. Somewhere in the Academy's administrative office, an automated system began generating liability paperwork. Channeling full fear spectrum to subject web, Quelix reported nervously, his brain literally sweating in its jar. Sir, this level of neural input could cause permanent psychological damage. Good, Varkesh growled. Maybe then he'll wake up and take this seriously. The chamber obliged. It pulled from the entire human fear database, every phobia, every anxiety, every nightmare scenario that Earth had ever produced and cataloged. The corner where Marcus slept became a swirling vortex of humanity's deepest terrors. Heights. He was falling from an impossible height, wind screaming past his ears. Marcus's breathing stayed steady. Deep breath in, deep breath out. Drowning. Water filled his lungs, pressure crushing him from all sides. Marcus shifted slightly, his head tilted to a more comfortable angle. The chamber escalated. Snakes. Thousands of them. Then spiders because the system wasn't sure which one humans feared more, so it threw both in there for good measure. Then public nudity, which seemed like a weird fear to the alien observers, but was apparently a big deal for humans. Marcus mumbled something that might have been "not today" and continued sleeping. How? Instructor Thelma said, her crystalline form pulsing with fascination. Is this possible? The neural load he's experiencing would incapacitate a Draknari warrior. Present company excluded, I hope, Varkesh muttered. But even he was starting to look concerned rather than angry. The chamber tried social anxiety. Marcus was on a stage in front of millions, completely unprepared for a presentation. The crowd was judging him. Everyone was judging him. His parents were in the front row, looking disappointed. His teachers were there, shaking their heads. An ex-girlfriend was there with someone more successful. Marcus scratched his nose in his sleep. What about human-specific existential dread? Suggested Professor Crexon, a tentacled being who taught advanced philosophy. Their species is known for profound anxiety about meaninglessness and mortality. Do it, Varkesh commanded. The chamber shifted to cosmic horror. The heat death of the universe. The insignificance of human existence in an infinite, uncaring cosmos. The certainty of death and the unknown void beyond. Every human philosopher's nightmare, rendered in perfect neural detail. Marcus started snoring. Not loud, but definitely audible on the monitors. A soft, almost peaceful snoring that suggested he was having quite a pleasant time. I'm going to be demoted for this, Varkesh said quietly. 40 years of service and I'm going to be demoted because a human used my panic chamber as a hotel. Meanwhile, the other cadets were having significantly worse experiences. Thornix had progressed from bargaining to acceptance, and then somehow looped back around to denial again. He was now arguing with his nightmare hive about the subjective nature of color, and whether green was even real, or just a social construct. You can't exile me for my exoskeleton shade. Thornix was ranting because color is just wavelengths of light, and wavelengths are just mathematical representations of energy, and energy is neither created nor destroyed. Therefore I am eternal, and my color is perfect. It was the kind of logic that made sense only to someone whose brain had been thoroughly scrambled by psychological torture. Pella was no longer a puddle. Pella was now a very thin film spread across roughly 10 square feet of floor, still burbling about mathematical impossibilities. The translators had given up trying to process what Pella was saying and were just outputting question marks. Rin had achieved some kind of dissociative state where he'd convinced himself that if he couldn't see the crowds, The crowds couldn't see him. He was facing the wall, repeating, "I am invisible, I am vapor, I am the void," in a monotone that suggested his grip on reality had gone on vacation. Hollis was just crying, all of his eyes, simultaneously. It was actually kind of impressive from a biological standpoint, if you ignored the profound sadness of it all. The observation room had filled up with what seemed like half the Academy's staff. Word had spread. The human is sleeping in the panic chamber had become the hottest gossip since Cadet Morfax's furniture proposal incident. "I have a theory," announced Dr. Kelvin, a humanoid professor who taught Earth studies and was technically the resident human expert, despite having met exactly 3 humans in his entire life. Perhaps humans are naturally resistant to fear-based stimuli due to their evolutionary history. "Explain," Varkesh demanded, grasping at any explanation that didn't involve his chamber being defeated by nap time. "Well, Earth is a death world. Class 12 hazard rating. Everything there is trying to kill everything else, including the weather, the plants, and occasionally the dirt. Humans evolved in constant danger. Perhaps their baseline stress level is so high that simulated fear doesn't register as significant." "That's ridiculous. You're telling me humans live in a state of constant panic?" "Not panic, sir, just elevated readiness. Their stress hormones are chronically active. It's why they have so many stress-related health conditions. They're literally not designed to relax." Everyone looked at the monitor where Marcus was fully relaxed, sleeping so peacefully he could have been in a mattress commercial. "Your theory needs work, Doctor," Thelma noted diplomatically. The chamber was starting to show strain. It had been cycling through fears for 40 minutes now, burning through processing power like Marcus burned through coffee. It threw every scenario it had: car accidents, home invasions, identity theft, that dream where your teeth fall out, the one where you're back in school and there's a test you forgot about, being late for something important, forgetting someone's name immediately after being introduced, technology not working when you need it most. For each scenario, Marcus's brain just said, "Yeah, okay, whatever," and continued its peaceful slumber. "Sir," Quelix reported, "the system is starting to repeat scenarios. We've exhausted the human fear database." "Then make something up." Varkesh was pacing now, all 4 arms gesticulating wildly. "I don't care what it is, combine fears. Make a fear smoothie, just wake him up." The chamber, in its desperation, created something new, a nightmare amalgamation of everything at once. Nuclear zombie spiders asking Marcus about his career plans while he was naked at a family reunion, during a math test on a stage over an infinite void, while customer service kept him on hold. Marcus mumbled something that sounded suspiciously like "weird dream" and shifted to his other side, getting more comfortable. "That's it," Varkesh announced. "We're going to manual extraction. This has gone on long enough." "Sir, we're only 90 minutes in. The test is supposed to last 3 hours. "I'm aware of the test duration, Quelix. I designed the test. But I'm ending it now before that human makes me look worse than he already has." "Worse than which part, sir? The sleeping part or the snoring part?" Varkesh's expression suggested that Quelix was about to have a very unfortunate training accident in the near future. "Just open the doors." But before anyone could hit the emergency release, something unexpected happened. Marcus woke up on his own. Not because of the chamber's efforts, but because his internal alarm clock, honed by years of terrible work schedules, told him he'd gotten about as much sleep as he was going to get. He yawned, stretched, and looked around the chamber with bleary eyes at the chaos surrounding him. Thornix was having a full identity crisis. Pella was a molecular smear. Rin had emotionally divorced himself from reality. Hollis was in a puddle of his own tears. "Huh," Marcus said, his voice rough with sleep. "Did I miss something?" In the observation room, you could have heard a pin drop, or a jaw. Several jaws dropped, actually, which for some species involved multiple parts. "He's asking," Varkesh said slowly, carefully, like someone trying very hard not to commit violence, "if he missed something." "To be fair, sir," Thelma offered, "he was asleep." "I know he was asleep," Varkesh roared. "Everyone in the entire academy knows he was asleep. It's going to be in the history books. The day a human slept through the panic chamber and ruined Commander Varkesh's entire career." I think you're being a bit dramatic, sir, Quelix said. Am I? Am I really? Because I'm pretty sure there are already cadets in the hallway taking bets on my resignation. He wasn't wrong. There were absolutely cadets in the hallway taking bets. The odds were surprisingly good. Commander Varkesh had been in the military for 42 years. He'd survived 3 wars, 2 assassination attempts, and 1 very awkward diplomatic incident involving a translator malfunction and the Xertaxian Queen. He'd trained thousands of cadets, commanded hundreds of missions, and earned more medals than he had chest to pin them on. He was respected, feared, and occasionally used as a cautionary tale in leadership seminars. None of that mattered now because a human had just slept through his panic chamber, and Varkesh's entire reputation was circling the drain like water in a broken toilet. Override safety protocols, Varkesh announced, his voice dropping to a dangerous octave that made several observers instinctively step back. Full manual control. Maximum intensity. Sir? Quelix's brain pulsed with alarm in its jar. We've already exceeded recommended neural load by 300%. If we increase further, we risk permanent psychological damage. The human is asking if he missed something, Quelix. He just napped through 90 minutes of concentrated psychological warfare and wants to know if he missed something. I'm willing to risk permanent psychological damage at this point. To him or to you, sir? Varkesh's look could have melted hull plating. In the chamber, Marcus had stood up, brushed some protein bar crumbs off his uniform, and was looking around with genuine confusion. The other cadets were in various states of mental collapse around him. Thornix was now arguing that color was a government conspiracy. Pella had achieved a state of matter not previously documented by science. Rin was humming something that might have been a funeral dirge. Hollis had run out of tears but was still trying. Hey, Marcus called out to no one in particular. Is the test over? Because I think these guys need medical attention. No! Varkesh's voice boomed through the chamber speakers. The test is not over. Sit back down, Cadet Webb. Marcus shrugged and sat back down in his corner. Cool. Just checking. Anyone got the time? This was somehow worse than the sleeping, the casual disregard, the complete lack of existential terror. Marcus was treating the panic chamber like a boring lecture he had to sit through, not a carefully designed psychological torture device. Maximum intensity, Varkesh repeated. I want every fear scenario we have running simultaneously. I want his neural pathways lit up like a star-going supernova. I want him to understand what panic actually means. Sir, this is insane. Document it as a training exercise. Call it Operation Wake the Human Up. I don't care. Just do it. The chamber obliged, possibly because it was also getting frustrated at this point. The entire system, powered by some of the most advanced neural technology in the galaxy, focused its considerable processing power on one sleepy human in the corner. It threw everything at Marcus, and I mean everything. Nuclear war, but the nukes were also spiders. Zombie apocalypse, but the zombies were his disappointed relatives asking about his life choices. Public speaking, but he was naked, and also drowning, and also falling, and also late for something important. His teeth were falling out while he forgot someone's name at a job interview that was also a math test that he hadn't studied for, because he'd been too busy dying in various ways. The chamber added in social media anxiety, climate change, political arguments with people who were definitely wrong but somehow winning, unanswered emails piling up, text messages left unread, the feeling that he'd forgotten something crucial but couldn't remember what, and the existential dread of waking up at 3 a.m. and remembering that one embarrassing thing he did 7 years ago. For good measure, it threw in student loan debt, because apparently that was a fear so potent it had its own category in the human database. Marcus blinked, then he yawned, then he pulled out his communicator to check if he'd missed any messages. That's it, Varkesh announced. I'm going in there personally. Sir, you can't enter an active panic chamber. You'd be subject to the same neural assault. I'm a Draknari warrior. I've survived worse than some simulated nightmares. With respect, sir, Thornix said the same thing and now he thinks he's a color. Varkesh paused, looking at the monitor where Thornix was indeed having a very intense conversation with himself about the philosophical implications of the visible spectrum. Fine. Then shut it down. Emergency extraction, all cadets out now. Thank you, sir, Quelix said with obvious relief. Initiating emergency protocols. Alarms blared. The chamber's white walls flashed red. An automated voice announced in that same cheerful tone, "Emergency extraction initiated. Please remain calm. Your panic is being preserved for quality assurance purposes. Have a great day." Medical teams rushed in, equipped with stretchers, sedatives, and what looked like industrial cleaning equipment for Pella. They extracted Thornix first, who was making clicking sounds that the translators rendered as, "I am become green, destroyer of wavelengths." He went on a stretcher, still arguing with invisible hive queens. Rin had to be carefully peeled off the wall. He'd pressed himself so flat that he'd actually started merging with the metal at a molecular level. The medical team would need to spend 3 hours reminding him that he was, in fact, solid matter and not a concept. Hollis was carried out by 4 different people because he'd gone completely limp and was surprisingly heavy for someone made mostly of eyes and regret. Pella required a mop, a bucket, and 2 very confused medical technicians who'd never had to extract a puddle before. They managed to scoop up most of Pella into a containment vessel, though they definitely missed some parts. There would be random Pella residue in that corner of the chamber for months. And then there was Marcus. The human stood up on his own, stretched again like he was working out some kinks from sleeping on a not quite comfortable surface, and walked toward the exit with his hands in his pockets. "So," Marcus said to the medical team as they approached him with scanning devices, "what's next? Is there like a written portion or something?" The lead medic, a Thelian with 6 arms and a professional demeanor, waved a scanner over Marcus while looking increasingly confused. "Your neural patterns are normal. Actually, they're better than normal. You appear to be refreshed?" "Yeah, I got like 90 minutes of sleep. That's more than I usually get in a night. Feeling pretty good, actually." But the chamber was active. The neural assault was at lethal levels. "You should be catatonic." Marcus shrugged. "I mean, I had some weird dreams. Something about zombie math spiders, but it wasn't that bad." The medic looked at his scanner, then at Marcus, then at the scanner again, like maybe he was reading it wrong. "Cadet Webb, I need you to understand something. The psychological load you just experienced would hospitalize most species. You're telling me it gave you weird dreams?" "Pretty standard weird dreams, honestly. Last week I dreamed I was late for work at a job I quit 3 years ago, and that was way more stressful than this." In the observation room, Varkesh was experiencing what could only be described as the 5 stages of grief, but all at once and in the wrong order. He'd skipped denial entirely and was cycling between anger and bargaining with occasional stops at depression. "Debrief," he managed to say. "Conference room. 30 minutes. Everyone." "Sir, shouldn't we give Cadet Webb time to—" "30 minutes." Varkesh walked out, his tail dragging on the floor, which for a Draknari was the equivalent of complete emotional defeat. Instructor Thelma watched him go, her crystalline form shimmering with something that might have been sympathy. "I've never seen the commander like this." "To be fair," Quelix offered, "none of us have seen a human sleep through the panic chamber before. Should we tell the Academy Chancellor?" "Oh, the Chancellor already knows. I'm pretty sure everyone knows. I've gotten 47 messages in the last 10 minutes asking if the rumors are true." "What are you telling them?" "That I'm as confused as everyone else, and that I need to update my entire understanding of human psychology." Quelix's brain bobbed thoughtfully in its jar. "Also that they should probably start taking bets on how this debrief goes. I'm putting money on Varkesh trying to fail Webb out of pure spite." "Can he do that?" Technically, Webb passed. He stayed in the chamber for the required time and maintained consciousness. He maintained more than consciousness. He maintained a REM cycle. Below them, in the chamber, maintenance crews were already working to clean up and reset the systems. One technician was scraping up the last of Pella with a spatula, and a lot of questions about his career choices. Another was trying to figure out how to get Rin's molecular structure out of the wall. A third was just standing in Marcus's corner, staring at the spot where the human had napped. Like maybe staring at it long enough would make it make sense. It wouldn't. But hope springs eternal. Even in military academies where a human just redefined everyone's understanding of fear, stress, and the proper use of a panic chamber. Somewhere in the Academy's administrative wing, an automated system finished generating Varkesh's incident report. It was 17 pages long. 15 of those pages were just the word sleeping repeated in increasingly larger fonts. The Academy was having a very strange day, and it was about to get stranger. The conference room was designed to hold 20 people comfortably. It currently held 47 beings from 14 different species, all crammed in to witness what was already being called the Web Debrief in the rapidly spreading Academy gossip network. Someone had brought popcorn. Well, the Krillian equivalent of popcorn, which was technically a form of fungus, but the principle was the same. Commander Varkesh sat at the head of the table, looking like a volcano that was deciding whether to erupt or just collapse in on itself. His scales had gone from their usual military gray to a sort of stressed-out purple that matched his mood perfectly. All four of his arms were crossed, which was the Draknari equivalent of building an emotional fortress. Marcus sat across from him, looking confused about why this was such a big deal. He'd even brought coffee to the debrief, his 5th cup since the chamber, but who was counting? Besides everyone in the room, apparently, because they were all staring at it like it was a dangerous weapon. Cadet Webb, Varkesh began, his voice controlled in that way that suggested significant internal screaming. Do you understand why we're here? Because I fell asleep in the test? Marcus offered, sipping his coffee. Look, I'm sorry about that, I didn't mean to. I just sat down and it was kind of warm and quiet, and I've been running on like 4 hours of sleep this week and… 4 hours this week? Dr. Kelvin interrupted, his datapad already out and recording. You mean per night? No, total. 4 hours total this week. The room went silent. Even the fungus popcorn stopped crunching. That's impossible, Instructor Thelma said, her crystalline form flashing with concern. Humans need 7 to 9 hours per night. That's in every xenobiology textbook. You should be dead. Marcus laughed, which was apparently the wrong response based on everyone's expressions. Yeah, textbook humans also don't have 3 part-time jobs and a full academy course load. But here we are. 3 jobs? Varkesh's voice cracked slightly. You have 3 jobs while attending the most rigorous military academy in the galaxy? Well, yeah. The academy stipend doesn't exactly cover Earth's cost of living, you know. I've got rent back home, student loans from my undergrad, my mom's medical bills, and that's before we get into food and basic necessities. So I work remote data entry from 2200 to 0200. I translate documents on weekends, and I do freelance coding whenever I have spare time. Marcus paused. Which isn't often, but you know, bills don't care about your schedule. The room had progressed from silent to the kind of quiet that usually preceded a significant revelation, or someone fainting. Quelix's brain was pulsing rapidly in its jar, which was either deep thinking or the beginning of a breakdown. Let me understand this correctly, Varkesh said slowly. You attend classes from 0600 to 1800. Then you work from 2200 to 0200. That's 4 hours of sleep maximum, assuming you don't eat, don't study, and don't do anything else. Oh, I don't get 4 hours every night, Marcus corrected helpfully. Some nights I don't sleep at all, depends on deadlines. Last week I had a project due for advanced tactics and a coding rush job, so I was up for about 50 hours straight. That was rough. Rough, Thelma repeated faintly. 50 hours awake is rough. I mean, I wouldn't recommend it. You start seeing things that aren't there around hour 40. But I've done worse. Professor Crexon, who'd been silent until now, suddenly spoke up. Cadet Webb, I need you to describe your average day, in detail, for science. Marcus shrugged. Sure. Wake up at 0530, shower, grab coffee, class until lunch, more class, combat training, more class, tactical simulations, dinner, usually something I can eat while walking. Then I've got about 4 hours to study, do homework, maybe sleep a little. Then work starts at 2200 until 0200. Then I've got 3 hours to finish any assignments I didn't get to. Maybe nap for 90 minutes if I'm lucky. Then start over. And weekends? Crexon pressed. Translation work, freelance coding, laundry, trying to remember what sunlight looks like. The usual. The usual. Marcus had just described a schedule that would kill most species and called it usual. Dr. Kelvin was typing frantically on his datapad. This explains so much about Earth psychology, the stress baseline, the anxiety disorders, the coffee addiction. Hey, I'm not addicted to coffee, Marcus protested. I can stop anytime I want. You're holding a cup right now. That doesn't prove anything. Varkesh raised one hand for silence, though his expression suggested he was having a significant crisis about his understanding of reality. "Cadet Webb, let me ask you something. When you entered the panic chamber, what did you think was going to happen?" "Oh, honestly, I thought it was some kind of meditation exercise. Quiet room, comfortable corner, no one yelling at me. I figured I'd take advantage of the downtime." Marcus looked genuinely confused by everyone's reactions. "Was it supposed to be scary?" "Yes," multiple voices shouted at once. Marcus processed this. "Well, I had some weird dreams, but compared to my actual daily stress levels, it was kind of relaxing. Like, at least in the dreams, I wasn't worrying about rent or deadlines. Dreamy was just running from zombie spiders, which is way less complicated than my real problems." Instructor Quellix's brain bobbed forward, his voice taking on the tone of someone making a horrible discovery. "Commander Varkesh, I think I understand what happened. The panic chamber works by creating stress levels beyond the subject's normal experience. It finds your baseline anxiety and then exceeds it dramatically. I know how my own chamber works, Quellix. But sir, if the human's baseline stress level is already at what we would consider critical psychological danger levels, then the chamber's simulations wouldn't register as particularly threatening. They'd be just another Tuesday." The room absorbed this information like a sponge absorbing existential dread. "You're telling me," Varkesh said carefully, "that humans live in a constant state of stress that would require medical intervention for any other species?" "That appears to be the case, yes. And that we've been training them wrong this entire time, because we assumed they had normal stress responses?" "Also, yes." Varkesh put his head in two of his four hands. "This is worse than I thought." Marcus raised his hand like he was in class. "So, did I pass or fail? Because I've got a shift in 3 hours and I need to know if I should start looking for a new career path." "You have a shift in 3 hours?" Thelma's voice had climbed an octave. "You just went through the panic chamber. You should be recuperating for at least 48 hours. "Yeah, but rent doesn't care if I'm recuperating." "How much is your rent?" Marcus told them. The number meant nothing to most of the aliens in the room because they had no frame of reference for Earth economics, but Dr. Kelvin did a quick conversion and went pale, which was impressive for someone who was already naturally pale. "That's criminal," Kelvin said flatly. "That's more than a Terran military officer's monthly salary." "Welcome to Earth housing markets. I'm lucky to have roommates, or it'd be worse." "You have roommates and still pay that much?" "4 roommates, actually. It's a small apartment. We have a rotation schedule for the bathroom." The debrief had officially gone off the rails. What was supposed to be an inquiry into Marcus's unprecedented performance had turned into a horrified exploration of why humans were apparently living in conditions that violated several galactic welfare standards. "Okay," Varkesh said, rallying his professional composure. "New question. Webb, what scares you? Actually scares you?" Marcus thought about it, genuinely considered the question. Not making rent? Disappointing my mom? The American healthcare system? Oh, and those scam calls where they pretend to be the government. Those are pretty scary because you never know if it's real or not until you've wasted 20 minutes. Those are practical concerns, not primal fears. I guess, but primal fears don't send you to collections or make your mom cry, so they're not really priorities." Varkesh looked at Quellix. Quellix looked at Thelma. Thelma looked at Crexon. Crexon looked at everyone and shrugged all of his tentacles in a gesture of complete bafflement. "Cadet Webb," Varkesh finally said, "I'm going to ask you to do something and I need you to be honest with me. Can you do that?" "Sure, Commander." "Go back to your quarters. Sleep for 8 hours. Not work, not study, just sleep. Then report back to me and tell me how you feel." Marcus looked genuinely distressed by this suggestion. 8 hours? "Commander, I have assignments due. I've got work. I need to." "That's an order, Cadet." "But 8 hours. Minimum. I'm informing your employers that you're unavailable. I'm giving you extensions on your assignments. You are going to sleep for 8 consecutive hours if I have to post guards outside your quarters." Marcus looked around the room like maybe someone would help him argue against this insanity. Everyone just nodded in agreement with Varkesh. "This feels like a trap," Marcus said suspiciously. "It's not a trap. It's called basic biological necessities. Apparently, your species has forgotten those exist." "My species hasn't forgotten." We just can't afford to remember." That sentence hung in the air like an indictment of Earth's entire economic system. "You passed," Varkesh said quietly. "For the record, you passed the panic chamber evaluation. You remained conscious, you maintained psychological stability, and you didn't require medical intervention. By every metric, you succeeded. But I'm also putting in a formal request to Academy Command to review human training protocols and implement mandatory rest periods because apparently we've been accidentally torturing your species through scheduling." "We're not being tortured," Marcus protested. "We're just busy. Webb, you described 50 hours awake as rough but manageable. That's not busy. That's a medical emergency pretending to be a lifestyle choice." Marcus opened his mouth to argue, realized he didn't have a good counter-argument, and closed it again. "So 8 hours?" "8 hours. Starting now, dismissed." Marcus stood, still holding his coffee, and walked toward the door. He paused at the threshold and turned back. "Hey, Commander, what happened to the other cadets, Thornix and everyone?" "They're in medical, they'll recover eventually. Pella might take a while since we're still finding pieces of them." "Huh, so I did better than them?" "Webb, you slept through what broke them. Yes, you did better. Now go sleep some more before I make it 10 hours. Marcus left, and the room erupted in conversation the moment the door closed. Theories flew, data pads appeared. Someone started a research proposal. Dr. Kelvin was already drafting a paper titled Human Stress Tolerance, a re-evaluation of everything we thought we knew. Varkesh sat quietly at the head of the table, processing everything he'd just learned. Humans weren't fearless. They were just so overwhelmed by their daily lives that simulated fears couldn't compete. It wasn't courage. It was exhaustion with extra steps. "Sir?" Quelix said quietly. "What are you thinking?" "I'm thinking," Varkesh replied, "that we need to completely redesign how we train humans, and possibly stage an intervention with Earth's economic systems. But mostly I'm thinking that I just watched a human nap through my panic chamber, because his actual life is scarier than anything we could simulate. And that's the most terrifying thing I've learned in 40 years of military service." "Should we tell the other humans in the program?" "Tell them what? That they're supposed to sleep? They'll probably just laugh at us." "Fair point, sir." Varkesh stood, gathering his dignity and his datapad. "Meeting adjourned. I need to go write the strangest incident report of my career and possibly reconsider every assumption I've ever made about training protocols." As everyone filed out, still discussing the implications, Instructor Thelma lingered behind. "Commander," she said, "do you think Marcus will actually sleep for 8 hours?" Varkesh's expression was grim. "I'm posting guards and confiscating his coffee. If humans won't take care of themselves, apparently we have to do it for them. That seems like it should be Earth's responsibility." "You'd think so, wouldn't you? But until Earth gets its act together, this human is sleeping 8 hours even if I have to personally ensure it happens." It was perhaps the most aggressive act of compassion Varkesh had ever committed, but someone had to do it, and apparently that someone was a frustrated Draknari commander who'd just had his entire worldview shattered by a napping human. The Academy was learning some hard truths about humanity today, and Marcus was about to get the longest, most supervised nap of his life. 3 months later, graduation day arrived with all the pomp and ceremony that the Galactic Military Academy could muster, which was considerable given that they'd had 3 centuries to perfect it. The parade grounds gleamed. Banners from 1,000 worlds fluttered in the artificial breeze. Dignitaries from across the galaxy had assembled to watch the newest class of officers receive their commissions. Marcus Webb stood in formation, wearing his dress uniform and looking significantly less like a sleep-deprived zombie than he had during the panic chamber incident. This was primarily because Commander Varkesh had made good on his threat and implemented mandatory rest periods for all human cadets, enforced with what could only be described as aggressive dedication. There had been protests. Marcus had argued that he needed to work. Varkesh had countered by having the Academy create paid internships that coincidentally covered exactly what Marcus had been earning from his 3 jobs, but with the minor difference that these internships had required hours that didn't conflict with sleep. It was bureaucratic warfare disguised as compassion, and Marcus had lost spectacularly, The result was a human who'd gotten an average of 7 hours of sleep per night for 3 months. He looked almost healthy. It was weird. "Cadets," boomed the voice of Chancellor Mordrix, a being of pure energy contained in a ceremonial suit for the occasion. "Today you become officers in the Galactic Defense Force. You have survived trials that would break lesser beings. You have proven yourselves worthy of the uniform you wear." The speech continued, hitting all the traditional notes about honor, duty, and service. Marcus tried to pay attention but kept getting distracted by the fact that he felt genuinely well-rested for the first time in years. It was unsettling. Next to him in formation, or rather in a special mobility support device, was what had eventually reformed from the puddle formerly known as Cadet Pella. The Quarian had recovered mostly intact, though they now had an involuntary stress response where they occasionally became slightly translucent. Medical said it would fade with time. Pella said they were considering it a fashion choice. Thornix had also recovered, though he now had a habit of asking people to confirm that colors were real before proceeding with any conversation. His therapist said he was making excellent progress. His hive mates back home had sent a very confused but supportive message saying they didn't actually care about exoskeleton shades, and please come home. We're worried. Rin had been successfully resolidified, and now taught a very popular seminar on meditation and finding your center, which was ironic given that he'd completely lost his during the test. Trauma had made him philosophical. The students loved him. Hollis had graduated with honors and immediately retired to a quiet planet where he was writing a memoir titled, "I Have Seen Too Much, a story of having too many eyes." "And now," Chancellor Mordrix continued, "we have special commendations for exceptional performance. Cadet Marcus Webb, front and center." Marcus broke formation and marched forward, trying to figure out what he'd done to deserve special recognition, besides accidentally revolutionizing the Academy's understanding of human psychology and forcing them to redesign half their training protocols. Commander Varkesh stepped forward, holding a medal that Marcus didn't recognize. The Draknari's scales had returned to their normal gray, though he still got a slight purple tinge whenever someone mentioned the panic chamber. "Cadet Webb," Varkesh announced to the assembled crowd, "you are hereby awarded the Star of Psychological Resilience for exceptional mental fortitude in the face of extreme stress conditions." "I took a nap, sir," Marcus whispered. "Yes, and in doing so you exposed critical flaws in our training methodology and forced us to implement better support systems for all cadets. Take the medal and accept the praise, Webb. You earned it through the power of being concerningly exhausted." Varkesh pinned the medal on Marcus's uniform, then leaned in close. "Also, your new assignment includes a psychological wellness stipend and mandatory time off. If I find out you're working 3 jobs again, I will personally file paperwork until you drown in bureaucracy. Are we clear?" "Crystal clear, sir." "Good. Now smile for the cameras. Earth's media is very excited about this story, though we've edited out the parts that make your planet's economic system look like a war crime." Marcus smiled. The cameras flashed. Somewhere in the audience, Dr. Kelvin was crying proud tears and taking notes for his follow-up paper, Human Stress Tolerance. Part 2. They're better when you let them sleep. Who knew? The ceremony continued with more awards, more speeches, and more ceremonial music that Marcus was pretty sure violated several conventions about acceptable noise levels. Eventually it ended, and the new officers were released to celebrate with their families and friends. Marcus found Commander Varkesh near the refreshment table, all 4 arms holding different beverages in an impressive display of multitasking. "Commander," Marcus said, "I never properly thanked you for the sleep thing, and the job thing, and not failing me out of spite." Varkesh's scales rippled with what might have been amusement. "I considered it. Briefly. Very briefly. But then I realized that you'd simply broken my chamber through being more stressed in your daily life than anything we could simulate, and that said more about your species and your planet than it did about your abilities. Also, Quelix threatened to write a very unflattering psychological profile of me if I let my ego compromise your career. Still, thanks." "You're welcome. Now about your new assignment." "Yes, sir. You're being posted to the Human Integration Division. Specifically, you'll be helping develop training protocols for future human cadets. We need someone who understands how your species actually functions, not how the textbooks say you should function. Marcus considered this. So I'm basically going to be professionally explaining why humans are weird? Exactly. It pays well, includes full benefits, and has strictly enforced work-life balance requirements. I took the liberty of reviewing the contract personally. You really did threaten me with bureaucracy. I'm a Draknari commander, Webb. Bureaucracy is our primary weapon system. Paperwork has ended more conflicts than plasma cannons ever did. They stood in companionable silence for a moment, watching other graduates celebrate with their families. Marcus' mom had sent a video message saying she was proud of him and asking when he was going to settle down and give her grandchildren, which meant some things were universal across all species. Sir, Marcus said eventually, what happened to the panic chamber? Varkesh's scales went slightly purple. We've redesigned it. It's now called the stress assessment chamber. It operates at 60% of previous intensity, and we've added mandatory breaks every 30 minutes. Also, humans are completely exempt from it. Completely? Completely? We created a different test for humans. It's called the relaxation chamber. Marcus laughed. That doesn't sound so bad. We put you in a comfortable room, give you a full 8 hours of free time with no obligations, no work, no responsibilities, and tell you to just relax. That's not scary at all. Cadet Finnegan lasted 6 minutes before having a panic attack about wasted time. Cadet Rodriguez started doing push-ups because she couldn't handle not being productive. Cadet Kumar tried to organize the furniture by size and color. We had to extract all 3 early. Oh. Exactly. Turns out telling a human to do nothing is more psychologically distressing than any nightmare we could create. Who knew? That's actually kind of sad when you think about it. It's very sad, which is why the new human training protocols include mandatory relaxation therapy. You're all going to learn to do nothing, even if we have to force you. It's for your own good. Marcus smiled despite himself. You really care about this, don't you? Varkesh's expression softened slightly, which for a Draknari meant his scales stopped looking quite so sharp. I've been training cadets for 4 decades, Webb. I've seen beings from hundreds of species, each with their own strengths and weaknesses, but I've never encountered a species that needed to be protected from themselves quite like humans do. You're brilliant, resilient, adaptable, and completely terrible at basic self-care. Someone has to look out for you until you learn to look out for yourselves. That's almost touching, sir. Don't make it weird, Webb. Too late. Across the parade grounds, a commotion drew their attention. Someone had set up a display about the new human integration protocols, and a crowd had gathered to read about the infamous panic chamber incident. The story had grown in the telling, as stories do. Some versions now claimed Marcus had snored so loudly it disrupted the chamber's audio sensors. Others said he'd dreamed of fishing and provided running commentary that was recorded for posterity. None of them were true, but they were all hilarious. You're a legend now, Varkesh observed. The human who slept through the panic chamber. That's going to follow you your entire career. Could be worse. Could be better. Fair. They watched the crowd for a moment longer. Someone had brought up a hollow recording of Marcus's peaceful sleeping face from the chamber monitors. It had somehow become a meme. The galaxy's various social networks had captioned it with things like, "When you're too tired to be scared," and "This human has achieved enlightenment through exhaustion." Sir, can I ask you something? Marcus said. Go ahead. Why did you really push so hard for the human protocol changes? It couldn't have been just about me. Varkesh was quiet for a long moment, his scales shifting through several colors before settling back on gray. Because I'm a military officer, Webb. My job is to prepare soldiers for combat, to train them to face any threat the galaxy can produce. But what I was doing to your species wasn't training. It was exploitation. I was taking advantage of your stress tolerance to push you harder without realizing that tolerance came at a cost. When I saw you sleeping in that chamber, I thought you were mocking me. But then I learned the truth, and I realized the real mockery was that I'd been so blind to what your species was enduring. That's probably the most honest thing you've ever said to me, sir. Don't expect it to become a habit. I have a reputation to maintain. Your secret's safe with me. Chancellor Mordrix's voice boomed across the grounds again, calling for one final toast to the graduating class. Everyone raised their various beverages in species-appropriate ways. Marcus lifted his glass, which contained something that was definitely not coffee, because Varkesh had threatened to confiscate his entire supply if he didn't diversify his beverage choices. "To the future," Mordrix declared. "To the brave officers who will protect our galaxy. To the humans who have shown us that sometimes the greatest strength is simply refusing to give up, even when everything is terrible. And to the panic chamber, may it rest in peace." "It's not dead," Varkesh muttered. "It's just been significantly nerfed." Everyone drank. Speeches ended. The formal ceremony transitioned into informal celebration. Marcus found himself surrounded by other graduates, all wanting to hear the true story of the panic chamber. He told it honestly, which made it both less exciting and somehow more impressive than the myths. Later, as the twin suns set over the academy grounds, Marcus stood alone for a moment, metal heavy on his chest, and thought about the journey that had brought him here. From Earth, from working 3 jobs and sleeping 4 hours a week, from being so overwhelmed that a psychological torture chamber felt like a nice break. He thought about Commander Varkesh's words about being protected from himself, about learning to actually rest. He thought about Pella, Thornix, Rin, and Hollis, all broken by fears that hadn't even registered as significant to him. He thought about what that said about humanity, about Earth, about the systems that had normalized constant stress until it became invisible. "Hey Marcus," someone called. It was Cadet Finnegan, one of the other humans in the program. "We're heading to the celebration hall. You coming?" "Yeah," Marcus said, turning away from the sunset. "I'll be right there." As he walked toward the lights and laughter, he made a silent promise to himself. He'd use his new position to help other humans, to make sure the Academy understood them better, to create systems that supported rather than exploited their resilience. He'd work hard, because that's what humans did, but he'd also sleep, because apparently that was important too. Behind him, Commander Varkesh watched the human go and allowed himself a small smile. 42 years of military service, and this was the assignment he was most proud of. Not the battles won or the medals earned, but the small act of forcing one exhausted human to rest, and in doing so, changing how the entire Academy treated an entire species. It wasn't glorious. It wouldn't make the history books, but it mattered, and sometimes that was enough. The panic chamber incident would be told and retold across the galaxy for generations, growing more absurd with each telling. But the truth at its heart remained simple. Sometimes the bravest thing a human can do is admit they're tired, and sometimes the kindest thing anyone can do is make them sleep. Marcus Webb slept through the panic chamber. But what he really did was wake up the Academy to the reality of human existence. And that, as it turned out, was terrifying in a completely different way.